Okay, the other thing that you need to remember about this textbook and about cognitive psychologists, or not, about social workers, is that, how the hell do you open this thing up? Huh. I have no idea. This is so exciting, I know. I'm so excited. Oh, the other thing that you need to remember is that this textbook is written for people that, not poor people. How's that? Can I say that? It's written for a rich white chick, rich white women. Okay? Because they don't really understand. And so a lot of the stuff you're going to go, well, that's obvious. But the reality is that it's written for rich white people. So what are we missing? We're missing that part. Okay. Yeah, so you guys are going to be going, well, this is fairly obvious. I don't understand why we're even talking about this. But the reality is that I don't have a clue. I don't have a clue. I'm going to go get the other one. It makes a lot more sense. Okay. Sorry. Got the wrong one. I'll go get the other one. Makes more sense. It's just down on the 5th floor. I'll be right back. I can't turn that off. Because if I do, I'll have to put up two videos. So if you want everybody to know who you are, in television land, please come in. How many chairs do we have left? We've got two.
Maybe we'll go stand in front of it. Yeah.
Oh, there's a chair back there. Oh, no. Anyway, okay. Now we'll make this thing work. So the reality is that a lot of people don't recognize differences, mainly because they assume everybody's just like they are. That has to do with diversity, the concept of diversity. But the world's actually more multicultural than it is diverse. Diversity teaches you that everybody's the same. But the reality is we ain't. We just ain't. We're different. And we have to recognize that. Well, you don't have to, I guess. You can pretend that everybody's the same. You can pretend that everybody has to show their ID card in order to buy groceries. That's not true. Only when I shop at the commissary, which is the military grocery store, do I have to show my ID card. It's the only price. If I go to Walmart, they don't care who I am. I don't think they do. Maybe they do.
Yeah, they have a post in the back says, watch out for him.
They have a picture of me in the back. Let's just scare the rats away. There you go. Water? 7-Up. Water, okay. I was just curious. Vodka? Okay. Water and ice, okay. It's not plugged in. Oh, don't tell me it's broken. All this.
And there are powers on the side of the wall.
All through. And the power's no good. It's too funny.
Just that one.
No, not yet. Oh, life is just too much fun. Nope. Oh. They turned off all the electricity. Do the lights work?
Maybe, they might have. I don't think the lights are working.
Oh, they're not? We've got no electricity? That's just too funny. That's too funny. The lights are working. And I've got no plug. Oh, no, here's the problem right here. Ah, good. Yeah, there it goes. Okay, we got electricity. How much fun is that? I'll trip myself. And I'll spill your water.
Oh, on camera too.
Okay. You know whose fault this is? Marius is the one that pulled this thing apart last. Marius, I swear. Okay. Okay, so that's so the reality is that they wrote this book for people that didn't really understand that there were other people out there, and we're going to go through a couple of things that you're going to go, well, that's obvious, but the reality is it's not obvious to everybody. The other thing that we need to remember is some people have never come in contact with other groups before. When I was teaching up north on the Fort Belknap Reservation, I was talking to one of my students who wanted to go into social work, and she was saying that she grew up being afraid of white people, and she really didn't communicate with them at all. The school that she went to was primarily native. There were hardly any white people there. The only white people she came in contact with were teachers, and they were scary and mean. Oh, this isn't turned on. So that kind of stuff happens, you know? And maybe you guys are afraid of me. Just kidding. No, I was coming up the stairs and this girl came out of the door and she got scared. But it was because she wasn't expecting to see somebody, not because I'm such a frightening. I don't think I'm that scary. Am I?
Oh, yeah.
Wait till Halloween. I dress up for Halloween, so. Am I that scary? Maybe.
Every other day except Halloween.
Every other
We were
day.
the only ones that dressed up for Halloween.
I know, you and I. Ah, jeez. We must be from up north.
Yeah.
Yeah, that must be it. I will go home and get my Halloween costume on Labor Day. I've already decided who I'm going to be.
What are you gonna do?
I'm not going to tell you that. I want you to be surprised.
Everybody up the dorm is gonna be superheroes.
Superheroes? Cool.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be a superhero. How's that? Okay, so we're talking about cultural influences. Cultural values can influence feelings about religion. We can talk about religion for an extended length of time. As a matter of fact, we are going to talk about religion a little bit in just a second. Cultural values can influence feelings about family structure and responsibilities. Really? Yeah. In many Asian societies, adult children are expected to provide shelter and care to their elderly parents. If you read a book about China, if you read a book about Japan, a lot of times the patriarch of the family makes the decisions, especially about money, because usually they're the ones that control all the money. So as you can see, despite the fact that he's a reproducing male and she's a reproducing female, and these are their children, this is the individual that makes the decisions, even though it's a female. In some cultures, parents and other older family members expect to be involved in decisions concerning marriage and money spent by adult children. And of course, that may include your culture. My dad thought that he should be able to veto the individuals that we married. Of course, it didn't work that way. We married whoever we wanted to anyway. When dealing with newly arrived immigrants, language skills may be sparse and local dialects may not be understood, and that can be a problem. So if we are, let's say we have somebody from Afghanistan and we get an interpreter in to help us with that person from Afghanistan. Well, there's like 15 different languages spoken in Afghanistan. The two major languages are Pashto and Darsi. Darsi is the same as Farsi. Farsi is the language spoken in Iran, but by the Persians. The Darsi, the individuals speaking that dialect, are actually Persian, but they're living in Afghanistan. You know how it works. You understand how it works. Anyway, so you might get somebody in who speaks Pashto and they can't speak Darsi, which is always interesting. I had a friend when I was working in D.C. and she was Darsi, and she had friends who were Iranian, and but they spoke with a different dialect, and they would make fun of each other all the time. The Persian lady would come over and say, she speaks with a really bad accent, and then the Darsi lady would come in and she'd say, she speaks like she's a princess or something. Yeah, that's the way she talked. So it was really kind of interesting, being in the middle of these two individuals arguing about their languages. Often people of different races or cultures have different expectations of the practitioner and the counseling process. This can especially be true of African Americans. African Americans, a lot of times they don't like to go to see a counselor. They don't want to admit that they have a mental problem. They have a very difficult time dealing with that. So that's one of the aspects that you're going to have to deal with if you have an African American client. Is the first thing you're going to have to deal with is the fact they really don't want to be there. And that may be difficult. On the other hand, there are select groups of individuals that really enjoy going to counseling. There are select Caucasians that just get a real charge out of it. And even if you fix them, they want to be broken so that they can come back in. As confusing as that is. So some people, they embrace counseling, and other individuals, they try to stay away from it. One of the groups that is, no, I'm not going to talk about that. Yes, I am. Researchers have discovered that Asian clients value insight and personal growth. They're really kind of interesting when you get an Asian client, because Asians will come in, and the first time you talk to them, you can't shut them up. They just jabber, 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 and you can't get a word in edgewise. The next time they come in, they won't talk to you at all. They won't say a word. They've given you their problem, now they want you to fix it. They think that you're the one with the expertise, therefore it's your job to fix their problem. It's really kind of fascinating. So you can get them to talk, and you've got to remember this. The first time you talk to them, you can get them to say something, but after that, they won't say anything at all. Now it's your job to fix them. They're looking for expert guidance, of course. They're looking for advice. They are looking for advice. They want you to give them the answer to the question. This is the way that they're raised. There's always somebody out there with the answer. And it's usually their parent, or it's an elder, or a wise man from their group. So they're looking for advice from you. They're looking for the answer. They want you to give them explicit instructions. What do I do about John? What do I do about this guy? And they want you to tell them exactly what to do. And then they'll ask you, well, what do I say to him? And you'll give them the script, and they will repeat that script to that individual. They really will. And then they'll come back to you and they'll say, it didn't work. With great big saucer eyes, they'll say, it didn't work. What's wrong? What happened? Because they expect you to know exactly what to do and what to say. They like things set up for them. They want you to solve all their problems, and they will give you their problems the first time they come in. The second time they want it fixed. They don't want to come in a third time. Well, they will if what you told them didn't work. No, it's fun. When dealing with American Indians, a counselor has to gauge how traditional the individual is as to determine appropriate timing of eye contact. There are some groups around the United States who act white. You won't be able to tell. They may look native, but they don't act native, or what you think is native, as confusing as that may be. So eye contact is really kind of interesting. Sometimes it's really, really kind of interesting. Okay, that's the last chair. So we're going to have to go steal a chair. That's okay, I've got a plan. How directly to come to a point in a conversation. A lot of groups, a lot of tribes like to talk around in circles, so that you don't talk about something specific. And if you try to get to the point, they will take you off topic until they get their, I know, they go around the circle. Question of personal space. How much personal space? How much personal space do they demand? I was coming into the building, and there was an individual that was hugging another individual downstairs in the lobby. Somebody had just told somebody something negative, and they were feeling bad about something, and here they were hugging. Well, everybody that came in was just, they were looking at them like they were having sex over there in the corner. It was really kind of weird. Personal space is huge. How much personal space do you need? It's kind of interesting if you watch Sarah and I talk to each other. It's like we talk to each other from across the room, because she's Canadian and I'm from Indiana, and we both have this huge personal space. When I first went up to Fort Belknap, they like to hug. People hug. You guys do too. Don't look at me like that. The Blackfeet do too. They're huggers, so they hug you. And the first time it happened to me, I just about backed up and fell backwards. I mean, it was really kind of interesting. So the personal space is always different. I've got a plan. I've got a chair for you. I'll get it.
Thank you.
Yesterday? Yeah. Yeah, I know the same thing.
And after this time, I'm
I know for me it's like 10 years, but mentally, like,
Or maybe 8:30. So personal space is huge. One of the reasons that Sarah seeks a larger personal space is because Sarah is Canadian, and Canadians are English. And the English have the largest personal space. I know. They have a problem with touching each other, I guess. So they'll talk from 3 or 4 or 5 feet away. It's really kind of interesting. The French, on the other hand, if you ever have a conversation with a Frenchman, they'll get right up in your face. You think, are you going to lick my cheek? What's going on? And they like to touch you. They like to touch you. That's the only way they're sure if you're listening to them, so they'll touch you a lot.
Yeah.
Even if they're yelling at you, they'll touch you. Well, of course, we're Americans, so we think if somebody's going to touch us and they're arguing with us, they're going to punch us or grab us or something. But the French do that. It's really kind of interesting. To see these people nose to nose touching each other and yelling at each other at the same time. And sometimes it's not even a negative conversation, it's a positive conversation. I mean, it's really kind of weird. Anyway, personal space is really kind of interesting. And of course, facial expressions are something else that we need to be aware of. In the United States, the dominant culture is the white culture. Because of the dominance of the white culture, whites tend to be given institutional benefits referred to as white privilege. Most white people do not recognize it as white privilege. But if you're not white, then you recognize it. You recognize the fact that they're getting stuff that you ain't getting.
But don't you think that the white culture, the minority of the white will be down south, and then there's more white up north, and this way maybe a little bit this way?
35% of the people living in Mississippi are black.
I think that
29
the white dominance and everything, I think they're starting to fade out. I think there's more minority.
Yeah, you're right. It is
But then
eroding.
there's
It's
that.
being eroded, but it's still there. It's
Yeah.
obviously still there. We can look at our politicians, and if we look for a minority face in Congress, you know, the 475 people in Congress, there's only a handful. Still only a handful. Somebody's running for Congress from one of the pueblos in New Mexico, and she's probably going to be elected. And if she is, she'll be the first native female to be in Congress. Yeah, I can't remember her name. I can't remember what pueblo she's from. Tacoma? I can't remember. I saw it in.
On the name.
I saw it on CNN. I saw it on CNN. So it's
Watch news.
yeah, but New Mexico. You read the New Mexico paper. It's not even in there. What's going on?
Got time to watch.
I don't know. Come on. So white privilege is something. It really exists. There's a lot of privilege out there that you don't recognize. Some people get stuff and other people don't. Tall people, for example. If you're tall people have privilege that short people don't get. Short people are really easy to overlook. Pretty people, attractive people. Attractive people get stuff. Almost said shit again.
That too.
Pretty people get stuff that ugly people don't get, and you don't even recognize it. Grades in school. Pretty people get good grades, and ugly people have to fight for their grades. Have to really actually do the work in order to get their grades. I know it's not really fair. What happened? There we go. Okay. All right. So the problem is, of course, white people don't recognize the fact that they have white privilege. This is Tucker Carlson. He doesn't wear a bow tie anymore for some reason. I can't remember what the reason is, but he stopped wearing the bow tie. But the reality is, white people get privileges that other people don't get. It's easier to get into college if you're white than if you're a minority. If you're a minority, then they assume things about you that they don't assume about white people. Attractive people get privilege as well. Tall people, athletes get recognized and get privileges that other people don't get. I hope, hopefully, at your high school, the athletes weren't just passed through so that they could compete. Yeah. I was up in Montana, and this doesn't have anything to do with your side of the state, but this is in the middle of the state. This one kid, what did he do? He tackled one of the teachers on the stairs, and with an indelible marker, he wrote "slut" across his forehead. And you would think, oh my God, they're going to kick the kid out of school. Well, no, he had a cross-country meet the next day, so they didn't suspend him right away. I know, so that he could run the track in the cross-country meet. Then when they did suspend him, they suspended him for 3 days. Well, the 3 days that they suspended him for were Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I know. And he had a meet on Monday, of course. Anyway, so this kid did all these horrible things, and he would act up in this lady's class, and he was giving her a really, really hard time. Anyway, athletes get privileges that other people don't get, and they don't recognize it. Possibly they're unaware of it. Attractive people think that, well, nobody gets a speeding ticket, do they? You know, attractive people don't get speeding tickets. The cop will go, oh, I'm going to give you a warning this time. Us ugly little short guys, and then I'll tell you what, they write us up right away. We're going to throw the book at you, you horrible monster. Yeah, it's good. Okay. Anyway, okay, so privilege is something that you have to recognize, and something that they may not recognize. Women and men are different. We know that. Their body parts are different. Women have long hair, men have no. It's not even close anymore. They respond differently to the same stimuli, and therefore they must be approached differently in therapy. Research shows that the male and female brains are different. And this starts at the 6th week of gestation. If the baby is a male, if the fetus is a male, then the fetus will have a different brain structure than the female, as strange as that may seem. So the male brain and the female brain aren't the same. And the reason is because of testosterone. The male has testes, the testes produce testosterone, so the fetus starts being bathed in testosterone. Anybody that has had a male child and a female child know that there's a difference between the two of them. The male was probably cried a lot more, he was sicker, it was a lot harder to get along with than the female child. This female child is like the perfect child. It's like an angel from heaven or something. My first kid was female, and she was like the perfect baby. I mean, she was wonderful. She potty trained herself. My son's still not potty trained. I mean, it's that bad. And he's 48 years old. He was on no schedule whatsoever. You never knew when he was going to be hungry. You never knew when he was going to need a diaper changed. My daughter, she was regulated almost from birth. So if you wanted her to sleep, she went to sleep. If you wanted her to eat, she ate. If you changed her schedule a little bit, it was okay because she would adapt. My son, if you fed him at the wrong time, wow, he started crying, he got colic. I mean, all kinds of horrible things happened. And my wife left when my son was 9 months old. And the reason she gave, well, besides she didn't like me that much, but the other reason she gave was because my son was so hard to get to deal with. That's why she left at 9 months. And he just got worse. So she was right. I should have left. I should have orphaned that kid. But sex isn't always the final word in gender. Gender is the social assignments of how males and females are supposed to act. Behavior is often based on gender stereotypes. And of course we do have gender stereotypes. But they are eroding. They are stronger in more traditional societies. In more traditional societies, boys look like this and girls look like this, and girls do this and boys do that. In more traditional societies, but of course in the United States we're a little bit more liberal than that. So our gender roles are eroding. Gender stereotypes prescribe how a person should respond to life. Unfortunately, social construction of gender continues throughout our lives, so it changes over time. When you're in elementary school, of course, it's fairly set. You can't really argue with kids about who should be playing baseball. Stephanie and I were having a conversation the other day. She was telling me what a tomboy she was and how that wasn't really acceptable to your brothers.
After a while.
After a while.
After a while, no. You're like, get out of here, you're a girl, you're disgusting.
You're a girl, you have cooties.
You have cooties, no go.
Gender bias comes through the use of unexamined stereotypes.
The good counselor will ignore stereotypes and allow their client to express feelings freely, and this is really kind of hard. So if you're dealing with a counselor who happens to be a church member, not a church member, that's not what I want, a member of the clergy, then potentially he has to follow the stereotypes of his religion. And of course, the religion was, I mean, all this stuff was set down, was written in stone centuries ago, potentially centuries ago, when gender stereotypes were much, much stronger. So it might be a little bit difficult for you to deal with that select individual. As I'm assuming none of us are clergy at this point and don't adhere to a select religion as far as our stereotypes are concerned, and we don't have that problem. We're not going to have that problem. Well, you may be dealing with an individual that has tried to use their clergy as their counselor, who has had a very difficult time dealing with the concept of stereotypes.
So that's gonna be my difficult part with the religious.
It's difficult for everyone, as horrible as that may seem. Some people do not agree with the sex that they're assigned by genetics. These individuals are referred to as transgender. If they have sex reassignment surgery, they become transsexual. So you're transgender if you feel like you're somebody else on the inside. Those of you who've been in my class before, I've told the story of my sister who married an individual. They were married for like 8 years, and then he decided he wanted to be her sister instead. He wanted to be her sister instead, and it just destroyed her. I mean, it really, really bothered her a lot. He was transgender, and I guess he's still transgender. I don't think he's transsexual at this point, but it's really hard for her to deal with that. But then again, he always felt like Vivian on the inside. That's what he kept telling everybody. I always felt like Vivian on the inside. And he started acting differently, and he started getting the hormone shots, and everything changed. Like I said, he never had the surgery. So this can potentially be a very real problem. How many people do you think are transgender in the world? Quite a few. Well, we know that Bruce Jenner, who is now Caitlyn, right? Who is now Caitlyn? We're going to have our first transgender governor. It looks like somebody is transgender, and I don't remember what state that is. The individual is transgender. But how many people are out there are transgender, do you think?
Hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, but we've got 365 million people in the United States, hundreds of thousands. That's not a very high percentage. But they do exist. Obviously, they do exist. They are changing the structures of bathrooms so that they can accommodate people that are transgender. We're trying to figure out what we're going to do with physical education, as far as which locker room do they dress in, or do they utilize? Which restroom do they utilize? This is really kind of an interesting problem. But we're dealing with it. This is all brand new. 15 years ago, it would be against the law to even consider yourself transgender. But today, of course, things have changed. And we do allow gay marriage now, where we didn't in the past. Transgender and transsexualism has nothing to do with sexual orientation. This is the confusing part for everyone. They think, well, if you're transgender, if you're a transgender male, and you think that you're female on the inside, you must want to date males. It isn't always that way. Your transgenderism has nothing to do with sexual orientation. So it gets really, really confusing.
So when I went home, I seen one of my cousin's daughters, and she dressed up like a boy and everything, and she's a lesbian. But her boyfriend, he doesn't dress up like a girl, but he's gay. And they're together, and they have a baby. And I just thought that was really interesting, so I went and I said hi to her and everything. She got all mad, but she
Okay.
Is that something new? Have you guys seen it?
Not
No.
really. Wow, that's confusing.
It really
That's
is.
really confusing. I guess nobody cared. Oh, you got a story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I attended that forum, that presidential forum
Sure.
on Monday,
Yeah.
and I don't know if he's like transgender or if he's like gay, but there's someone that's running for president for the nomination.
Oh,
Yeah, we just in there.
fascinating. Fascinating. The question is, will people reject him because of that? He's transgender?
Oh, well, I was confused by that.
Okay. And the question is, will people reject him because of that? It's going to be interesting.
And then they asked the question about the LGBTQ community
Right.
to another president or President Kennedy, and he wasn't like for it.
Oh, he's against, he didn't support it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that should be interesting to see what happens. I'm so excited. Well, good luck on your election, and hope everything turns out.
That's what I mean, it's fun.
It's
That's
gotta
why
be
it's
something.
topic conversation.
Great. Once upon a time, when the Europeans first came to the Americas, of course, they were being controlled by various churches, various Christian churches, the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church. And their idea was that you can't do this. Well, of course, this was seen in the Native community. Of course, it wasn't seen in Europe. It wasn't seen in the church rejected these ideas. So a lot of that was acceptable before Europeans got here, but because of the religious structure, because of the religions, they rejected that whole concept. And I hope that natives haven't rejected that just because of the new teaching. You know, traditionally, you accepted everybody, no matter what, and of course, sexual orientation didn't really mean that much as far as that was concerned. So it's really kind of interesting. It's fascinating, isn't it? All these changes that have taken place just over the last decade or so. When the Christian religion controlled a lot of things, social control, when there was a lot of social control due to the church, of course, then this was against the law. You could be arrested for sodomy and whatnot. As odd as that may seem today, in the past, of course, it was something that was rejected. Okay, what are we talking about? Sexual orientation is the direction or the directions of one's sexual affection, affectionate or loving attention. As Andrea was saying, wow, she's a lesbian and her boyfriend is, wait a minute, or is it her girl?
It's a guy.
He's genetically a male,
Yeah,
but he's gay.
he's gay. I don't know how it works.
I
you
don't know either.
I know that.
But I don't think it's any of my business.
I know I shouldn't say this, but I know that she needs counseling because her mom did commit suicide when she was younger, or
Okay.
when she was only 6 months, and
Wow.
so she grew up with boys.
Right.
And I was the last one to see her mom, so when I seen her that day, I told my sister, I said, "Is that Joey's daughter?" And she was like, "Oh yeah, Joey's a lesbian and her boyfriend is gay, but they have a baby together, you know, Carolyn and a baby." And I was like, "Well, how is that possible, you know?"
Anything is possible.
It's probably from like growing up a tomboy, you know, you grow up around a lot of males and you get a lot of that male influence. And when I don't know how it is in other families, but in my family, the guys really were accepting of anybody, and it really didn't matter what gender, what religion, whatever, you know, so they were more accepting than it was when I would go back to the female house and, you know, learn how to clean, cook, do all that, you know, indoor girl stuff, you know, and from there, you know, my observation there in that household was different, you know, the females were more like really guarding into who they let into their circles and who they allow to have conversations
males
with.
weren't.
But the males weren't. So I think maybe for her, it might be more of like a trust, you know, that trust that you can survive with this person, that comfort
Right.
and that security,
Yeah,
knowing that,
100%.
that you will be okay and your kid will be okay, and you don't have to go outside of what society think is normal to achieve that freedom to love one another. I guess that's what it would be. And then with the whole gender thing, it's making me think about that conversation I had the other day about Mel Gibson's movie, That Passion of the Christ.
Right.
You know, how some conspiracy theorists say that, you know, Jesus was gay and the disciples were somebody that or homosexual, and his disciples were someone that shared that common idea. And that's why he was such a bad influence on the society then. And of course, at that time, there was different societies coming in. The major influence was the Roman Catholic
Right.
Church, which establishes, you know, what's right and what's
Right.
wrong in sex and gender.
Right. Wow.
So, I don't know, but that's what it made me think of.
Any question?
Yes.
I don't know if you guys heard Ariana Grande's song, but she recently released it. It says her song is called "God Is a Woman."
Yeah, I've heard that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Listen to it. Put on your playlist.
Put on your playlist, please. And Stephanie, put
I
on
was
I'm
your
just saying,
playlist.
Well, I was listening to Cher on my way in, so, okay. And her son, no, wait a minute, her daughter.
daughter.
Well, it was Chastity and now it's Chaz.
Chaz.
Yeah. Okay.
Very sad.
Well, she's kind of, has a deep voice. Cher has got a really deep voice.
She,
I don't care. It's not important. I like her music. Embedded in sexual orientation or societal beliefs, stereotypes, and views about sexual expressions. It all has to do with where you come from. I grew up in a Methodist community. If you know anything about Methodists, and it's not important, but Methodists, of course, have very strict rules, and everybody has to act this way and whatnot. Really kind of curious. Coming out for homosexuals is complicated, but has been made easier by the legislation of homosexual unions. There were select states that recognized homosexual marriages prior to the federal government recognizing it. One of those states was Iowa, strangely enough. Does that mean there was a lot of gay people in Iowa? Well, there were for a while because they were coming to Iowa to get married. But not especially. It was just a relatively liberal-minded group of individuals in Iowa. A lot of Lutherans, not real strict religious background there. Practitioners are not immune to heterosexism. Heterosexism means that you assume that everybody has the same ideas that you do if you're heterosexual. As I told you, we had some fairly militant lesbians that I went to college or went through my PhD program with, and they were very militant, and that's all they wanted to talk about, which was kind of interesting. By the end of the program, we were all conversing fairly openly about other things. They realized that's just one thing that we need to argue about. Chair in the hallway. Yeah, I think carried a little bit of chair. Good. I already carried one chair. No, I'm not carrying another. Okay. Socioeconomic status is something else that you need to be aware of. And I've talked about wealthy people before. They don't have the same mindset that other people have. If you assume that they do, then you're going to be surprised. I think that's one of the reasons why people are so shocked about what's going on with President Trump. President Trump grew up rich, and he has never been poor. He doesn't understand how to buy groceries, which is kind of interesting. They really don't have the same ideas that other people have. There's 365 million people in the United States, and people who grow up with privilege and with wealth probably don't account to more than 2 or 3 million people in the United States. So what we've done is we've elected somebody who has different ideas. Oh, good job. Where'd you steal that?
President's office.
You didn't mention my name when you stole it, right? Okay, good job. Socioeconomic status refers to standards and measurements of economic wealth and structure.
Socioeconomic status is especially efficacious in capitalist economies where wealth dictates your position in society. And actually, there are more of these societies than you can imagine. When I was reading the book about the Romanovs, the aristocracy in Russia, they owned everything. They owned everything along with the Orthodox Church. If you weren't a part of the aristocracy, you owned nothing. Nothing that you had belonged to you. It was given to you by an aristocrat. If you farmed a piece of land, he could always come and take all the food off the land. One of the problems they had in Russia was that they had a large Jewish population that they didn't like. Well, Jewish people have been kicked from pillar to post. They had been driven into Russia, and at some juncture they were allowed to live there. But anytime they decided to kick them out, they just came in and took all their stuff. They killed as many as they wanted to. If you were an aristocrat and you killed somebody, that's not murder. It's not murder because, well, unless it's another aristocrat. They killed Rasputin. I don't know if you know the story about Rasputin. He was a religious leader, and he was changing the mind of the monarchy, of the Tsar and the Tsarina. So an aristocrat, a prince, came and killed him. And of course they couldn't charge him with murder because he was an aristocrat. And Rasputin was a peasant. And there is no law against killing peasants if you're an aristocrat. Anyway. So different societies, of course, have different ideas. In the United States, socioeconomic status is kind of important. So how do we measure socioeconomic status? It has to do with how much money you make. It has to do with what you do, as what your occupation is, and how much education you have. And one of the reasons that they tell you to get as much education as you possibly can is so that it will raise your socioeconomic status. You can get a PhD in social work. Social workers don't make a whole lot of money. But you can get a PhD in social work and it raises your socioeconomic status. There aren't very many PhD social workers, by the way.
In another class, this is true for those of us who are in the lower income scales.
Right.
Because we can get Pell, we can get scholarships,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
The truly elite who are in Donald Trump's income category do not go to our schools.
No.
Okay, they go to the elite schools
Right.
where there is a higher level of instruction,
Right.
higher level of everything.
Right.
Opportunity for jobs,
Right.
opportunity for businesses,
Right.
opportunities for the elite living situation.
Right.
Which most of us, we will be very happy with our own careers,
Sure.
in our own environment,
Right.
and we will never have knowledge of anything in the higher elite levels.
Oh, sure. You'll never come in contact with it.
Yeah.
So you're perfectly happy where you are. The question is, do you want to be one of those people? If you become a politician and you go to Washington, D.C., then you come in contact with these individuals who were born with a silver spoon, and they went to Harvard, and they went to Groton. They went to all the elite schools, so they were being not only bred, were they bred for their power structure, but they were also educated for their power structure. And they automatically will wander into these high-paying jobs. I went to a college like this. I went to one of the elite colleges in Indiana. And there were a number of individuals that just assumed it didn't really matter whether they passed their classes or not. They always passed their classes somehow. Okay. They didn't even have to work. That was the hard part. These are not the athletes, okay? These were the individuals that didn't really have to do a whole lot. But they knew that they were going to be successful because they were going to go into their father's business. They're going to go into law. They're going to go into medicine. Or they're going to go into banking, which is really kind of interesting. So you're right. You're absolutely correct. These individuals, you will never come in contact with. And as long as you are happy with this level this second tier of knowledge and occupational level, then you'll be okay. As long as you don't strive to be that kind of a person. You can go into politics and you can jump into that tier right away. That has happened to a lot of different individuals. People that were born poor and then all of a sudden now they're multimillionaires because they went into politics. A good example would be Lyndon Johnson. Jumped right into that upper tier of an occupation. He became president of the United States, of course, and he's the one that passed civil rights. As curious as that is. John Kennedy thought of the idea, but of course John Kennedy was one of those individuals who went to Harvard and whatnot. The Bushes went to Yale, all of this stuff. And they get in automatically. It's not like you have to apply and you're not sure if you're going to get in or not. They get in automatically. And I was admitted to Wabash as a minority. I was a poor kid. I was a poor farm kid. And I was one of the rare few. Most of them flunked out because we were not used to that level of interaction with people. And I was lucky I could run fast. And because I could run fast, they let me get through the first year. And after that, I kind of stuck my thumb in their eye and went ahead and passed everything. I know they were irritated. Socioeconomic status influences many aspects of your life. Quality of health care, of course. They don't have to worry about going to the hospital. If you're a member of Congress, you get the best health care for life. So all the congressmen that retire, of course, they get all the best health care. Obesity is tied to socioeconomic status, of course. So these individuals, you rarely see a really fat, wealthy person. These are the two richest men in the United States. This is Bill Gates, and this is, I was just thinking of his name, and I can't think of it. He's from Omaha. What is his name? I can't think of his name. Anyway, these are the two richest guys in the United States. I wouldn't want to be rich because I wouldn't want to dress like that. They have to wear fancy shoes all the time, and black pants and white shirts. I mean, if you see pictures of them, they're always dressed up. I couldn't be president of the United States. I'd hate to wear those shoes. That's nasty.
Oh, there must be so uncomfortable. That's not bucket.
And they always have to wear ties. Who does that? Educational possibilities, of course. Neighborhoods that you can afford. So it have to do with socioeconomic status and child care. These all have to do with socioeconomic status. It is important for practitioners to understand the invisible but powerful impact of socioeconomic status. So you have to recognize it. You don't have to mention it, but you have to realize, well, possibly the reason that they have this problem is because they are relatively poor, they're wealthy, and they think that they should be privileged, and they're not being privileged. You need to recognize it but not talk about it, because you can't change your socioeconomic. Well, you can, but you can't tell a person, well, if you made like $20,000 more a year, you'd be okay. Everything would be fine. This would be great. So go find a job that pays $20,000 more. You can't. They work where they work. They make the money that they make. The higher the socioeconomic status, the more likely a practitioner will assume success for their client. The reality is that, and of course I come in contact with these individuals, they're not any more happy than anybody else. As a matter of fact, they're maybe less happy, because whereas nobody cares how much money you guys make, this is their end all and be all as far as they're concerned. If they make $1 million a year, they want to make $1.5 million. And this is a drive that they have. They're expected to be successful, and if they're not successful, sometimes they live beyond their means. And of course, we're seeing this right now with Michael Cohen and with Paul Manafort. Both these individuals were living beyond their means.
Are you watching Fox News?
No. I watch MSNBC or CNN. Yeah, yeah. They're not as nice to Cohen and Manafort as Fox News. I can't imagine what Fox News is saying. I mean, one pleaded guilty and the other was convicted. What could they possibly be saying that's positive about these individuals? Probably that they have nothing to do with Donald Trump. Okay. That's
Donald
wrong.
Trump calls them fake news.
Well, CNN's fake
Yeah.
news. And MSNBC's fake news. Okay, let's talk about spirituality and religion. For many clients, spiritual and religious beliefs and training are key to their existence. You've got to recognize this. Religion doesn't mean anything. Let me tell you a reality. When I started in my PhD program back in 2000, they did a survey in like 1999. And what they discovered was that 80% of the people who are counselors were either agnostic or atheist. 80%. Which kind of helps you a little bit, because if somebody comes in who's a Methodist, you know, if you're a Catholic and somebody comes in who's a Methodist, you think, well, maybe it's your religion that is your problem. But if you don't have a religion at all, you can accept everybody. Anybody can come in and tell you about what's going on. You can talk about spirituality with anybody if you don't have one yourself. If you have one, then you want to argue with the person about their spirituality. Now all of a sudden you've lost them, they're gone. That's the old days. I'm not exactly sure where we are. Nobody's done this study since 1999. So I'm not exactly sure if the clinicians these days are religious or not religious. But one of the things that you have to recognize, whether you are or you aren't religious, is that their religion may be the most important thing to this individual. That may be the doorstop that this individual uses in their lives. A wise practitioner will not question a client's spiritual or religious training. You really can't. This has to do with how they grew up. And you really can't go, well, you know, your mom was wrong. And of course, we had a problem with this just recently. The individual had epilepsy. This is the little boy that was 4, and his father kidnapped him and took him to just north of Santa Fe. So when he went to the compound, they thought he had demons. He was had demons in his system or something. So they tried to exorcise the demons, and they killed him during the exorcism. They killed him. As sad as that is. Can we argue with that? Doesn't seem right, does it? However, I mean, I don't believe in demons, but they did. So, I mean, how in the world can I argue with that? It's not my job. That's not my job. It's not my place. If somebody's Catholic, I can't argue about their Catholicism. If somebody's a Methodist, I can't argue with that. If somebody's a Church of Latter-day Saints, I can't argue with that. If that's their religion. And that's the way you have to see it. I mean, if you can't handle somebody who's a Muslim, then maybe you're in the wrong job. If you see them as monsters or whatever, and some people do. Some people see them in that vein. If you can't accept them as humans, then you got a real serious problem. I had a friend from West Virginia who kept telling me that they're not human.
So is that why it's hard for a lot of people to come to grips with the reality of the Catholic Church and the sexual abuse victims, that are the whole pedophilia thing that's going on with that?
Yeah.
Because I know that is that a reason why they just pay them off? Because
Right. Well, when I was up at Fort Belknap, almost everybody on Fort Belknap's Catholic, and they had a child abuse situation like 20 years ago. Well, more than that, 40 years ago. And the people that were abused, of course, were pissed. They were really upset, and their parents were upset and whatnot. But all the rest of the people, they didn't want to hear about it. They didn't want to talk about it. They just accepted the religion. As far as they were concerned, the religion was pure. The
kind of
religion.
like, if it's too horrible to look at, look away kind of thing.
Yeah, I didn't see it
I
then.
didn't see anything.
Didn't see
Let's
it.
just move on like it didn't happen.
Which is okay. I mean, that's just the way. That's their
their religious structure, and that's okay. I mean, you know, 300 priests in Pennsylvania, that's a lot of priests.
Yeah.
What is this picture? This is a picture of individuals flagellating themselves. The Shia in March. It changes like Easter. In March, they will march through the streets and they will flagellate themselves, and they will beat themselves until they bleed. And that's because they are Shia, and the Shia believe that Ali should have been the second prophet. Muhammad, of course, was the first prophet, but they believe that Ali should have taken over the church, or taken over the religion after Muhammad, and he was assassinated out in the desert. And they beheaded him, and they chopped his body up, and they spread him through the countryside. They just took his body and threw pieces out all over the place. And because of that, because he was martyred in March of 633 or whatever, these individuals will do this in March. They will flagellate themselves. The more they bleed, the more holy they are. So there you go. I don't know. That's just.
I thought that meant like
Flagellate? No. That's another word, okay. It's not flagellate.
How do you
no.
say it again?
Flagellate? Flagellate, it means to beat yourself. Flagellation? Okay, to beat them. Religion involves communal behaviors. Spirituality can be understood as an individual's relationship to God or any ultimate power, and of course we can't argue with people's beliefs. Some religions are totalitarian in nature or don't accept any other religious concept as legitimate but their own. And this gets a little confusing because everybody else is wrong and they're right. Of course, you would only have one religion if everybody accepted all other religions as correct. So there's only one right answer, right? And it's my way. It's either my way or the highway. And there are a lot of religions that are that way. My second wife was a member of the One-Way Church, and their symbol was a finger pointing up. I'm not sure it was this finger, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, that was kind of interesting. It's a little surprising that she married me because I'm very, not adamant, that's not the right word. I'm not religious, and I admit it. I'll tell everybody. But she married me anyway, and it was a little confusing. And she had other problems. We won't go into that. No, that wasn't a problem. Okay. It's when she wore that one-way church. That was. She had a T-shirt with a finger pointing up. I don't know what that meant. Anyway, they didn't believe that any other church was correct. They hated Catholics. They hated everybody. They hated everybody. Okay. They hated Baptists. It wasn't a Baptist church. Anyway, it was a youth movement, as odd as that sounds. Anyway, she lost her virginity in one of the camps. I don't know. That's a strange story. Other religions are pluralist in nature and accept many practices as legitimate, and of course that's known as ecumenicalism, where they accept other religions as not incorrect. Maybe not correct, because their religion is the correct religion, but as not incorrect. That's known as ecumenicalism. A practitioner must be aware that their own spirituality or religion might taint their view of a client. And this is one of the reasons that so many clinicians, a lot of people will go in to start a counseling program and they'll realize I can't talk to anybody except somebody from my own religion. And then they drop out of the program. And this may be one of the reasons why there are so few people that are actually very religious. One of the reasons why we have so many Jewish counselors is because Judaism is a very accepting religion. As confusing as that may be, but these individuals tend to make relatively good counselors. And of course, the individuals that don't believe anything, they can accept anybody that comes in the door. And it's always interesting for them to talk to people about this or that or the other. Whereas there's another individual who is a staunch Catholic, somebody comes in the door, they want to convert them to Catholicism.
I think that's mostly how a lot of the programs are here on there's not very many counselors who are non-religious.
Right.
So a lot of them come in with that. So a lot of them do get converted, I guess, in a
Well,
way. In order for them to get out of it, they have to go through it.
You get stuck.
And they get forced through the system.
If you're trying to convert somebody to your own religion, now all of a sudden you're not dealing with whatever
With the
problem they
problem,
came in
no.
for.
So now they're gonna have Christians that have that same addiction, and now they're gonna have Christians that are gonna be perpetrating
Right.
those abuses in their sect.
Okay.
Yeah, so I still don't get that, because my brother goes to AA meetings, and a lot of it is like Christian influenced, and
Well,
it's Catholic
It's
influenced.
real, AA meetings aren't supposed to be are supposed
Yeah.
to be a-religious.
Mhm.
You're supposed to talk about higher power, but not
Not a-
God,
Yeah,
not a
but that's
specific.
where all the conversations.
That's the way AA is supposed
Well,
to be.
some of the churches are, I know in Chile, the LDS church is doing, was doing, I should say, AA type meetings.
Right.
But they make people aware that it's based on the LDS values. So they
Okay.
do make reference to God and Jesus and the values, taught
Right.
by the church.
Right.
Whereas like Talbot House, I don't think they're associated with any particular religion, are they?
That's not the one he's going through. He's going through one through the clinic, that's why it made me curious. It was
Yeah.
through the clinic why that was.
How would that be religion based?
Yeah, see, that's why,
It's not supposed to be.
that was my question, and that's why I was like, dude, we're gonna find somewhere else to take you. It's like, we're not gonna come back.
Whoever put the program together may have been
May
very
have been
religious,
Yeah.
and so they structured it in their own fashion. So that's why it's so religious. Anyway, so AA meetings are not supposed to be religious.
Yeah, so
They're
instead of helping him those first few times, they kind of just agitated him even
kind
more
of
and.
beating him on the head, trying to change
Yeah,
his
he's-
way of thinking. A practitioner must accept a client within the client's religious context, and of course that's not always the easiest thing in the world, but if you're a-religious, of course you don't have to worry about it. If you can turn that switch, if there's a switch in your brain that you can turn your religion off, if you can do that, then you should be okay. You should be able to accept anybody, no matter who that select individual is. I've had individuals that told me that they had a difficult time dealing with Satanism. The reality is Satanism is not really a religion. And a lot of times it's just anti-Christian
It's an
concepts.
ideology.
Yeah, it's more an ideology. But I've had a lot of individuals that had a difficult time dealing with people that could claim to be Satanists. But, this is just something that you need to think about. I'm not really trying to scare anybody away from being a counselor. But, this is if there's somebody that you don't like, if there's somebody that you don't think that you can handle, that's going to be the first client you have, I promise you. I can bet $1 million that's exactly what's going to happen. The person that you don't think that you can handle is the first client that you're going to have.
What was your first client?
I don't have that problem. I love everybody, so I didn't have that problem. I can handle anything, let me tell you. Well, being in the military, one of my jobs was picking up dead bodies, so you can imagine, and doing autopsies. So I can handle just about anything. I've watched lots of people die. Nothing bothers me.
I think in the Native American community, I don't think we would really have a problem like that. We all have our higher power and who we go to, but from being up north and then being down here, I see it as we're all the same in some way or another. And so if I was to go seek counseling here, I know I would be offered to smudge myself, and everything like that. And then I go up north and it would be the same way. So with the Catholic, and how they put it together, we were brought up with the Catholicism, and we intertwined it with the Native American, and I see a lot of it down here too.
Right.
So I think we formed our own new religion status, and our priest back home, he retired, and we loved him, you know, we really did.
Did he speak Blackfeet?
Yeah, he did. And then we had another priest who lived out in Heartview, and he was out there for many years, but we had to retire him because he kept getting drunk on us.
That's not good.
Yeah, but you know, I think we've kind of created our own religious status.
I don't disagree with that. I have to stop right now because it's time to stop, but we'll pick this up next time. Think about it over the weekend, and we can have more conversations. So if you're upset about